that's the goal with all of this technology, is that, there are things that AI and technology are good at, data ingestion and synthesizing, templating, ordering, all of this sort of stuff technology is really good at. What are we good at as humans? Well, we're good at building that rapport. We're good at putting people at ease. We're good at all the kind of softer, non-verbal stuff.
Yeah.
So let's use technology to allow medicine to become more human again. And allow us to focus on that really nice human side of healthcare.
Hey, welcome back to Women Disrupting Tech, and thank you for tuning in to episode 166. My name is Dirk-Jan Hupkes, and this is the podcast that closes the funding gap in venture capital by amplifying the stories of female founders and their investors. Imagine an industry where almost half of the people working in it says they're likely to leave the industry in the next 5 years. Would you say that industry is ready to be disrupted? This number comes from the Royal College of General Practitioners, the UK's professional body for GPs. Some of those GPs join a tech company to work on a better healthcare system, and one of them joins me in this episode. Dr. Hannah Allen is the Chief Medical Officer at Heidi, an AI care partner that helps doctors focus on patients instead of paperwork. Before moving into tech, she practiced as a general practitioner across rural, inner city and hospital settings in the UK for 14 years. In this episode, we talk about what happens when AI takes over the parts of the consultation that prevents doctors from performing at the top of their license. By listening, you'll learn how the admin burden in medicine contributes to 42% of UK doctors thinking of leaving medicine in the next 5 years, why over 90% of patients report feeling more listened to when their doctors uses an AI scribe instead of typing notes during the visit, and why software vendors like Heidi should do everything they can to educate clinicians about the upside but also the risks of using AI. Plus, you'll hear the story of a pediatrician who used Heidi's AI to write a patient explainer for a 7-year-old in the style of Taylor Swift. So when you're ready to discover how AI brings the human side and the fun back to medicine, here's my conversation with Dr. Hannah Allen. Before we start, I wanted to let you know about a cool event that is coming up. The TEDx Koolhaven Women event takes place on October 9th from 6:30 to 11:30 in the evening at Halvier aan de Maas in Rotterdam. This year's theme is The New Builders, a theme that seamlessly aligns with the content on this podcast. Throughout the evening, you'll hear powerful TED Talks from women who are redesigning the systems that shape our lives, from leadership and parenting to women's health, mental health care, and access to investment capital. Together, they'll explore what it takes to build a better future. As a listener to this podcast, you know that we're living in a time of transformation, one that women can and should contribute to as well. So you know that this evening is going to be one of a kind. That is why I'm happy to offer you the opportunity to be there in person, to listen to groundbreaking talks and meet and network with like-minded people. As a listener to this podcast, you'll get a 25% discount when you use the code WDT25 at checkout. And even though this is a TEDx Women event, men are very welcome to join. To buy your ticket, follow the link in the caption and remember to use the code WDT25 before entering your payment details. With that, let's listen to this week's episode of Women Disrupting Tech. Dr. Hannah Allen, welcome to Women Disrupting Tech. It's an honor to have you. How did you get into your current role as Chief Medical Officer at Heidi?
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, first of all. Really excited to be here. Let's kind of, take a look back in history. So I've been a GP now for about 14 years, so practicing in the UK.
Right.
Um, and practiced across all different settings in the healthcare settings, in rural settings, inner city, etc. And across all of the sort of hospital system in the acute departments, but also in community. So a real sort of breadth of clinical experience.
Uh-huh.
So I could speak to the challenges that we have as frontline clinicians. And I guess I've always been quite a curious person that questions the status quo, um, which can be a little challenging if you're wanting a doctor to just be a cog in a wheel and to see the patients instead of wanting to sort of look at the bigger picture and look at how we could do things better and how the system could improve. Um, I also studied a science degree before I did medicine, and really love the idea of sort of hypothesizing and using basic scientific principles to think of how we could do things better. Um, so I think moving into tech was a natural sort of progression for me, but it began with me wanting to improve the way that we deliver healthcare for pregnant and postnatal women. Because as a GP, I was seeing women coming in and out through my door, predominantly around sort of fertility, contraception, pregnant, postnatal, perimenopausal, menopausal,
Mm-hmm.
very defined specific stages of their lives, and they were really struggling with them, and yet would have to see them in 8 minutes during my clinic and have to sort out during pregnancy and postnatal everything from breastfeeding challenges to sleep challenges to pelvic floor challenges, etc., etc. And it just wasn't possible. I felt like I was giving them a subpar service. So I was looking at ways to um, provide them with a better service that they deserve. And I came across at the time, this was 2015, 2016, and there were lots of really interesting technologies coming out and sort of, personalizing lots of other services, yet healthcare had nothing. So it baffled me, but it really struck a chord because I thought that to actually scale personalized care and a proper, optimal healthcare service, you had to use technology. And that's when I decided to make the move into tech. And I joined a company called Babylon Health, which is a telemedicine AI provider back in the day, to build out the women's health vertical, but also to build out the product in other countries that have less access to healthcare professionals. So one of the countries was Rwanda, where we had there were 800 doctors and 12 million people. So I thought it was fascinating thinking about how you scale a service to reach those people on the ground who really need it. Um,
Yeah.
so I was at Babylon building out those sort of product verticals and moved into quality and governance, where I headed up the team when we launched the UK's first digital first primary care service. So again, lots of learnings around that. Stayed there for about 4 years, loads of learnings around how to bring technology to consumers' hands and in the B2B space as well.
Yeah.
And how to build things in the right way, safely and effectively. And then I left to found my own women's health startup in pregnancy and postnatal space. Again, really wanted to democratize access. Meanwhile, being able to predict disease risk earlier in a woman's journey. That's what I was really passionate about as well. And I felt by building out a longitudinal data pipeline, you would be able to do that. Turns out there are a lot of challenges with building your own company, fundraising, and all the rest of it that we'll get into. I then left my startup and consulted with a bunch of startups around the kind of pitfalls of fundraising, the challenges, the opportunities, but the challenges of like product 0 to 1, growth 0 to 1 as well. And then came across Heidi, and it was a real sort of crossroads for me because I guess I was a bit jaded and cynical,
Uh-huh.
in part from the fundraising experience that I'd had with VCs, but I felt like it was this pivotal moment where Gen AI had just really boomed into the industry, and yet morale was in its boots amongst healthcare professionals and clinicians, and 42% of GPs were wanting to leave the workforce because it was such an awful environment. And I thought, surely there is something that we can do to be able to cater for these doctors better. And hence, a friend of mine said, well, try Heidi. It's working really well for a lot of doctors. And so I gave it a go. And it was one of these moments where it's like seeing magic. completely changed the way that I saw healthcare being delivered. And it was like a light bulb moment going off in my head, and knew I had to join and really support the cause. And so jumped on board to help kind of grow and scale and speak to clinicians in the UK and Europe about what Heidi is, what an AI care partner does, how it reduces the admin burden of being a clinician, and ultimately, helps us to enjoy being a doctor, nurse, allied healthcare professional again. So I guess in a nutshell, I really enjoy the kind of curiosity, but the scalability of technology and that ability to deliver impact at scale. But it still allows me to really channel the reasons why I went into healthcare in the first place and became a doctor, which was purpose driven, and to, build things that hopefully have real clinical impact and have an impact on our patients as well.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I want to double click on. You work for Babylon
Yes.
and you also worked in Rwanda.
Yes.
What did that teach you, or what did you run into that opened your eyes, like that actually benefits also now as within the context of Heidi in terms of how we deliver medical services?
Yeah. So I think I've worked in many different capacities around the world. And the challenges that healthcare professionals are experiencing
Mm,
feel very unique to us in our region. Um, However, my learnings are that grossly, a lot of them are the same, right? We're all time pressured in the
mhm,
emergency department and general practice, where it's high footfall, high pressure environments. We are all operating at a really high pace with no real time, right? Time is scarcity there.
mhm,
Um, and accessing the right information in seconds is really, really difficult. And that is around the world. Sure, in very hard to reach places, parts of Africa, for example, can be incredibly difficult to access really high quality information to support nurses and doctors on the ground. Uh, and that is where I think technology can come in. And one of the reasons why, Heidi's reach is really important. And we support clinicians in over, 110 countries around the world. That health equity piece is really, really important to me. But also, we support many, many different languages around the world. And that also is really important, because that means that as a UK based clinician, I can still converse with somebody, speaking another language, and I can take into account those kind of cultural, environmental nuances. And that in technology is incredibly difficult, unless you're building that in from the get go and really understanding that environment that the clinician is working in. So I think overall, it taught me that we all think we're unique and different, but a lot of the challenges are the same. However, the nuances of that environment, the language, the cultural adaptations that you need to make to technology need to be built in from the get-go and considered early.
okay. And the second thing I want to double click on is I think you said something along the lines of that you want to actually see if we could predict diseases coming in. When did you build it, and was that was before AI sort of took off, right?
Yes, exactly. So I'm
Is that something that that now could be built, you think?
100%. So the reason why I wanted to do this was because I had read quite a lot of research that suggested the way a woman's body behaves in pregnancy is how it behaves in older age, which I thought was fascinating, because there's no other health state that we know of, because we treat pregnancy like a disease, right? You have
Yeah,
appointments and you're essentially on like a sickness path.
it's medicalized.
Exactly. But actually, what we're not doing is using it to gather personalized insights and curate that woman's experience. Yet we've got these incredible insights into their body, their potential pathophysiology in later years, So it's kind of a wasted opportunity. And I'm sure in years to come, we will be doing that. So it was certainly, we didn't have the technology like we do now to
Mhm.
support us in understanding this. But I was just fascinated. And there are some companies doing some really interesting research and commercializing products,
Mhm.
specifically within, for example, diabetes, and thinking about the relationship between gestational diabetes and type 2 diabetes when you're older, um, and various other sort of commercial products that are coming to market. One that I think is really interesting that I was spending a lot of time thinking about is how you can personalize a woman's kind of wellness and sickness by understanding her kind of hormonal cycles and what we can do about that, right? How we can adapt the environment, but also, are there certain medications or supplements or, things that could really optimize that woman's experience during a natural cycle, and everyone's is different. And I found that really, really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I spoke to Ida Tin a couple of episodes ago, and she
Mm,
mentioned that actually having that hormonal data set for women is actually key to, well, pretty much unlocking a lot of cures, treatments,
mm.
and solutions to women's health problems.
100%, yeah, and it's not really being considered. I saw recently a product come to market that was similar to Zoe,
Mm.
um, but it was for hormones specifically. So in real time, you can measure your own hormone markers.
Yeah.
And importantly, what do you do about that, right? Because that's all that everyone is going to say to me. We were talking about it in the office with some of the women yesterday. And actually, is it adapting your working environment? Is it adapting when you exercise, what you do, what supplements you take according to your cycle? I think that is definitely the direction of where we're all going to be heading in the not
Yeah.
too distant future.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And actually, I think there's a challenge from Sprint, which is a German Bundesamt, so German government initiative to actually build solutions that collect the hormonal data set from
Interesting.
that. That's something that is happening right now. I don't know exactly what the progress is on that, to be honest. Um, So what I was wondering about, many clinicians ultimately, I think many clinicians are really enthusiastic about AI, but on the other hand, a bit skeptic, likely, because, well, at least if you use AI like I do, it tends to hallucinate, and the level of hallucination for men is a bit different
Mm.
because we have, well, a different hormonal data set. Um, and also because medicine was largely built on men's bodies to begin with, so there's more known about it. What do you think worries clinicians the most at the moment, still, as AI also evolves, of course? And how do you deal with that from Heidi?
Yeah. So really good question. I think there are a number of things from speaking to kind of peers, colleagues, etc. Um, there are a number of things that worry clinicians and patients as well, right? And I think that our environment that we operate in conferences, for example, is a small minority of early adopters, really. There's a large proportion of clinicians that are worried about it.
Mhm.
However, I would say that the latest data has suggested that up to 75-80% of clinicians are using AI in their everyday practice, right?
Oh, they
Which is
are.
surprising. And what we need to make sure is that they are using it in the right way, so they are educated, they understand where their data's going, they understand, what happens to the note, where is it deleted from. All of these things are really, really important. I think it's our responsibility as the vendor to educate them as to all of these aspects of how to use AI and technology
Mhm.
safely and effectively. So I think that clinicians are worried about, you know, um, hallucinations, for example. People have
Mhm.
spoken a lot about hallucinations. Um, and I think that this is really important that clinicians understand the role of a scribe is not to replace your clinical judgment. The role of a scribe is to synthesize what's being said and order it so that it looks like something I would write, for example. So it's really important that clinicians know the role of the scribe versus clinical decision support, which is very different.
Is that also because they're sort of afraid that AI will replace them over time?
Yeah, I think there's a small proportion of that, of clinicians thinking it might replace them. I think the majority are nervous about who's getting their hands on their data and what are they doing with it, right? So it's really important, I think, that, you know, vendors are not training anything. The data isn't being used to train any models or train any AI or technology, and that it's being handled safely, securely, encrypted, and deleted in a timely way. All of those things are super important from a vendor perspective, because I think that's what makes clinicians nervous and patients nervous as well.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I think it's necessarily maybe it's a bit of an intersecting where I was trying to go, but I think it's really important that the data that
Yeah.
is generated actually flows into the models for the simple reason that all the models are biased. They are tainted by basically the knowledge and insights that
Mm,
people programming have at
mm,
the moment of programming. And the
mm,
only way to sort of quote unquote cleanse the data or
mhm,
actually augment the data in such a way that it becomes more inclusive, I
mhm,
think, is to have the data flow back in.
yeah,
And
yeah,
obviously there's privacy concerns there, don't get me wrong.
yeah,
But I think it's important that the data does come back, because otherwise if the AI does not learn
yeah,
from
yeah,
its mistakes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I think the industry is not quite ready for that yet. In principle, it's an interesting principle. However, the industry isn't ready and patients aren't ready and clinicians aren't ready. And depending on the kind of jurisdictions, etc., certain areas say, yes, that's fine. And most say, no, it's not. The other thing to bear in mind with this topic is that can you train can you essentially get a model to unlearn things, or is it better to start again with equitable, fair data sets? I guess that would be my question: is can you teach it to change and adapt?
Yeah,
If there is bias already in there.
yeah, that's the implicit assumption that I have, and
Yeah,
indeed, it's you're right calling that out.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting though, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
I'm a big fan, especially of women feeding their data
yeah,
in a safe way to AI types of solutions,
yeah.
because then I think the only way to solve the bias problem is by augmenting the data set,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because the chances that it will be rebuilt from scratch.
yeah.
But maybe that's me. That I don't see that happening because I haven't seen it happen before. But
Yeah. I think it's also depends on the environment. So if we think about the consumer environment and the wearable environment versus the patient clinician, environment, it's a very sensitive, sacred environment, isn't it?
mhm,
Where it's conversational data. And I feel like that needs to be preserved and really respected, you
mhm,
know. Whereas I wonder whether the consumer environment, it feels like, as a consumer, I'm understanding that the data I'm putting into my period, tracker or
yeah,
like whatever, um, it's my choice as to whether that is, used to train, etc.
yeah,
Whereas a conversation between a healthcare practitioner and a patient is a very sacred environment. Um,
yeah,
so I feel like that kind of needs to be protected.
yeah. True.
Yeah.
That I understand as well. But just wanted to
Yeah.
see what your thoughts are.
Yeah.
Um, So I wanted to go to Heidi because it does something like really interesting.
Mm.
On the one hand, it gives clinicians headspace because it listens in on the conversation and then transcribes what has happened. But on the other hand, I was wondering what the end stage of it will be. So let's first maybe describe what Heidi does at present and where you want it to go.
Yeah. So maybe if I walk you through Heidi's journey as
Yeah.
well, because I found it really fascinating. So Heidi was founded by Tom Kelly, who did a maths degree before a medical degree, and then trained to be a surgeon. He's now no longer a surgeon, but he spent many years kind of learning the trade. But because he understands the technical side of things, is essentially an engineer as well, he
Mm-hmm.
could really envisage what this new world could look like using technology to
Uh-huh.
deliver healthcare, and could see as a practicing doctor at the time that our week was slowly becoming consumed by admin and all the inefficiencies that are introduced to the system, plus that cognitive burden of being a doctor worn down by admin is pretty bad.
Yeah.
Um, so he really re-envisaged this world where we could use the new technology to drive change for good. And Heidi started out as quite a different platform and evolved with the evolution of generative AI into initially a scribe, and decided to launch the scribe around the world in 3 different locations all at the same time, in Australia, the US, and the UK.
Uh-huh.
And what we saw was rapid adoption of this across the UK, rapid. And in fact, I remember about 6 months after I joined Heidi, um, and I was at my daughter's tennis match, and 2 GPs were there, and one was talking to another. I didn't know them, and one was saying, "Oh, you've been using this Heidi. It's very good. Have you tried it?" To the other one, and I remember it was this moment of thinking, "Wow, these people have heard of this." And it's not through me. It's in the middle of Devon in the southwest of the UK, right?
Yeah.
And it was wonderful, and it was amazing to hear the impact that Heidi was having on these doctors' lives. But it showed me really how rapidly that scale had occurred, and it was predominantly through word of mouth. And clinicians, we're quite particular people and hard to impress, actually.
Uh-huh.
So I was very happy that we were sort of passing, by word of mouth around how great the product was. So and we produced the scribe, which really quickly grew, 2 million consults a month now in the UK, 12 million consults a month being supported globally. But we didn't want to stop there, right? We knew that we were having impact because A, we measured it, but B, anecdotally, people were telling us, "Oh, I'm going to work as a GP until retirement now. I'm not going to quit. I was going to quit." GPs with dyslexia, for example, who were saying, "I absolutely cannot face the typing burden, the documentation burden," are
Uh-huh.
now saying it's revolutionized their practice. The average GP saving an hour a day in their consultations. Throughout the emergency department, we're seeing time savings of 85%, which is huge when you
Yeah.
think the throughput through emergency departments. So the impact is very clear to see, and we started measuring burnout symptoms as well amongst clinicians. In the emergency department, we were seeing that 95% of our clinicians were reporting reduced burnout symptoms. So it was huge when you think that, the RCGP had surveyed all of the GPs in the UK, and 42% of them had said they're going to leave in the next 5 years, right? So it's massive when you think about that retention and attrition of staff. But we didn't want to stop there, right? That was great that we're having this impact, but actually, where else are clinicians, nurses, doctors, allied healthcare professionals spending our time, right? If a third of our working week is spent on admin, what's all the other stuff? Where are we losing the efficiencies in our day, other than documentation? And one was searching around on the internet to look for information, guidelines, frameworks, personalized information that we can use to guide our management of a patient in front of me.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so we ended up acquiring a company called Automedica, which had built exactly that. The ability to surface the right evidence and information in that moment to me as a clinician so that I can practice at the top of my license rather than searching around on the internet for ages. And so we then, brought in this kind of evidence platform into the Scribe. And we started to build out other sort of product verticals like coding, for example, and revenue cycle management to support hospital systems and GPs being able to receive the funding for the work that we do. But ultimately, the goal is really about giving time back to clinicians, removing that admin burden. And so if you think about how a clinician operates before a patient comes into the room, is synthesizing all of that information,
Mhm.
making sense of it all. If you've got a really complex history, how do I read through all of your letters? It's almost impossible to do, but AI can do that very well,
Yeah.
synthesize it down to a couple of sentences. Within the consultation, prompting me with clinical decision support is the future. We're not there yet, but being able to kind of prompt in those moments to make sure that I'm practicing according to the latest framework that came out yesterday, for example,
Mhm.
or the latest studies that have just shown that actually, we're not meant to be prescribing XYZ for patients with heart failure. And then when the patient leaves the room, how do I monitor that patient effectively when I'm not there all the time in front of the patient? How do I make sure that the patient has the appropriate follow-up? How do I make sure that the information flows with the patient
Mhm.
so that you're not turning up as a patient into the emergency department and having to repeat your history over and over and over again?
Yeah.
Intelligent information flow, um, but really reducing all of that admin burden associated with being a clinician.
Okay. You mentioned headspace
Mm,
and less admin, having to do less admin. Um, you also mentioned the burnout
yeah.
symptoms. I was wondering what kind of mistakes you saw happening as a
Mm,
result of the old situation that you hope to resolve to solve for with Heidi.
yeah. Well, look, I think I can speak to the reality as a doctor myself. Um, I remember having patients coming in to see me who would have been waiting, almost an hour sometimes to see me. And then I may be, sitting with, I remember having one guy with me who was having mental health challenges, etc. And he was with me for almost an hour. And you then have to document all of that. You have to do all of the follow up associated with it. So it's a huge amount of burden on you while you can see all the other patients waiting for you. So, I've sat in my surgery before with my head in my hands, with the phone ringing, with a patient, waiting to walk in the door, with somebody else's notes open. So there are just so many ways that errors can happen when you're in that scenario, and we call it the Swiss cheese model in medicine, where, an error won't happen or patient harm won't happen if one of the holes in the Swiss cheese line up. But if all of them do, you know, then that's when you have a problem. And we've seen from the research that the prescribing rates go up the more that doctors are tired. We know, that,
Just to get rid of to get rid is the wrong word, but just to get it off the list, of the to-do
yeah,
list.
I don't know whether it is that specifically. I think it's more just the cognitive overwhelm.
Yeah.
You start to see more and more of those kind of prescribing rates towards the end of a day with a tired doctor, you know? So, and it's that there are many instances like this where we start to see certain behavior towards the end of clinics or at the end of, a 40 patient day, for example. Um, it's not the same experience for the clinician as at the beginning of the day. And it's also the context switching, right? The
Yeah.
context switching every 10 minutes is very tiring. And actually to remove that and allow a little bit more headspace is having huge amounts of impact, which is where we're starting to see, clinicians saying, actually, um, I've got far less desensitization. I'm feeling much more engaged with my patients again. I'm feeling like I enjoy my work again. One GP said to me that it's making consultations fun again, you know?
Well, to the
Incredible.
extent that they can be fun.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. So that's what I really care about, is kind of giving clinicians the tools so that we can enjoy our work, because ultimately, if you have that environment, you will see a knock-on effect on patient outcomes as well.
Okay. Do you use AI currently in the product?
In clinical practice,
Mm-hmm.
yes. So I use Heidi. Yeah.
Yeah, but Heidi uses AI.
Yes.
So we talked about that many people, so patients and clinicians, worry about the errors that
Yeah.
AI can make.
Yeah.
Um, how does Heidi help clinicians identify and maybe even correct those errors, so
Yeah.
they don't sort of make or create waste in the system?
Yes. Really good question. So I think as any kind of software vendor in a regulated market, there are certain accreditations and frameworks that you have to adhere to anyway. So there's quality assurance measures to ensure that we are doing things in the appropriate and right way. So part of that is making sure that we train the clinicians so they understand the risks and the challenges with using this type of technology. So, for example, hallucinations. Clinicians have to know that with this technology is a risk of hallucinating. And what do they do about that? Well, we make sure, that clinicians read through all of the note and that it represents that conversation they had with the patient accurately before pushing it through to the electronic healthcare record, because the record is the ultimate gospel of what happened between the clinician and the patient.
Yeah, and also the song sheet for the people treating the patients later.
Absolutely, absolutely, exactly. So it has to be reflective of that. Um, but also, we've kind of taken it one step further. So we've introduced a product called Verify, Heidi Verify. So it essentially looks at the transcript and the template that was produced and highlights areas of low certainty or low confidence to say, this might not be right. You might want to look at this a little bit further. Was this what was said? For example, in fact, most cases of hallucinations are actually noise related, right? So it's either there's a poor microphone or a truck goes past when the doctor says something, and in those instances it's really difficult to transcribe the accurate conversation. So, but it's important to point that out to the clinician, in that moment, for them to double check that. So I think it's about empowering the clinician to understand the risks and to do as much as we can to highlight those risks to the clinicians in the areas of potential, changes.
Okay. And what is your experience with, let's say, patients using with who have doctors using Heidi?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do they give? Can they give feedback, and how do they do that?
Yeah. So I really like this topic. So there are some patients that are terrified of AI, right?
Yeah.
And I think in those instances, of course, you consent the patient. You say, "Do you mind if I use this tool? It's recording, etc. It's going to write my note for me." And if they say no, of course you don't use it, right? You just go back to old school typing.
Hmm.
Um, and I think so. In my experience, I've never had a patient say no. One patient worked in the tech industry and said, "Oh, can I see the note at the end?" And as it was loading, she said, "Oh, wow."
Yeah.
And in fact, I've had I've got a consultant who I work with who's a respiratory doctor who doesn't work with Heidi. He's in a hospital in London. And he said that he shows the patient every single time, he shows them the note and he says to them, "Is anything missing?" Which I thought is lovely. It's such a nice experience for the patient because they read through it there and then, because he saves so much time. He has this time to invest into the patient. And they say, "Oh, actually, I said this as well as this," or, "Can you remove that bit?" Or whatever. So it's a really nice shared experience for the patient rather than getting home and reading a letter and not having a clue what it says. The other beauty of it is that you can ask Heidi to generate a patient-facing version there and then.
Oh, yeah.
So, and one example that I love was we had a pediatrician that asked Heidi to write a patient explainer to a 7-year-old in the style of Taylor Swift. Now, don't ask me what that was, but apparently the 7-year-old liked it.
Yeah. Okay,
um,
more in general, what is the response from patients to it? Is it positive or?
yeah, in my experience, it's very positive. However, there's always going to be a spectrum of patients, and like I say, I think it's our job as clinicians to respect what patients want us to do. But generally, in my experience, it's all been very, very positive. Ultimately, the patients most of the time want to optimize that time with their clinician, and they feel better listened to. Actually, they feel like from the patients that were surveyed in some of the external evaluations we've had, over 90% of them have said they feel more listened to when a doctor is using AI because I'm looking you in the eye, I'm putting my hand on your shoulder rather than turning away and typing is a horrible experience for patients,
Yeah,
right? And it's a much more of a shared experience because I'm now speaking out loud. I'm saying, oh, your blood pressure is measuring 120 over 80. That's really good. I'm going to press on your tummy here. Does it hurt here over the right side when I press in or when I let go? And patients are saying to me, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that's why you did that. Oh, I'm really glad you explained that, doctor, which just didn't happen before.
does it instill trust, or does it give back trust into the medical profession, you think?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't thought about it from that angle, but it could well do because what I like about it is that we are practicing a much more of a shared care model rather than historically medicine is a paternalistic model of me, I'm the powerful one, I have the knowledge. And actually now patients also share in this knowledge. It's much more equal, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. And also to your point that you made a moment ago, talking to a person who is then turning his head away or her
Oh,
head away and then typing, which I can tell you I've been in many times. I haven't been with the doctor many times, but all of until like 3 years ago, it was all of that
yeah.
only the whole
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
that there is nothing more frustrating than that. And what I've also seen is that doctors and clinicians and people, also assistants, are
Mm.
getting more human almost.
Yeah. 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 That's the goal
Yeah.
with all of this technology is that, there are things that AI and technology are good at, data ingestion and synthesizing, templating, ordering, all of this sort of stuff, technology is really good at. What are we good at as humans? Well, we're good at building that rapport. We're good at putting people at ease. We're good at all the kind of softer, non-verbal stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so let's use technology to allow medicine to become more human again, and allow us to focus on that really nice human side of healthcare.
Yeah. On that point, do you also think that it will benefit women's health?
Yeah,
Because we can collect more data, we can collect better data, especially on the diagnostic side. We can actually start listening instead of filtering through, oh, this is a woman about 45 years old, oh, must be menopause.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I really hope so. And I think we're moving in that direction. What I'm excited about is as we start to think about kind of multimodal healthcare, genomics, wearable data, biomarkers, voice biomarkers, all of these types of things that a lot of women engage with, but actually will allow us to have so much more insight into how a woman's body behaves alongside of all of the other kind of mainstream traditional healthcare technology that we're starting to see.
Mhm.
I hope that it really closes that equity gap, so that we can really understand women's bodies and healthcare needs much better.
So, what do you hope or think you'll achieve in the next 5 years with
Oh,
Heidi?
yeah, that's a really good question. Look, I think I would love to see a world, and I can imagine a world where, as a patient, when you move from one environment to another, you aren't having to repeat yourself because information is carried, agentically and ambiently in a way that works for you, that belongs to you. You own your own data, but everyone is able to see it in a way that they need to, or engage with it in a way that they need to. I imagine a world for clinicians where they aren't having to use an electronic healthcare record at all. Everything is agentically and ambiently supported. So we're able to focus on that human side of healthcare. And I imagine a healthcare system where we are able to really put into action that left shift, moving away from this reactive, episodic healthcare to this kind of continuous, proactive, preventative healthcare model
Mhm.
that keeps populations well for longer. So we stop talking about patient-centered care and we start talking about person-centered care. That's the kind of world that I envisage as creating in the future.
That sounds like a great place to close. Got two questions left. One is I'm actually also building with AI, not in the medical space, um, but I'm building an AI funding coach to connect founders, female founders, with investors. Um, from what you learned building Heidi, and also building an AI companion for clinicians. Which of those learning could apply to what I'm building?
Interesting. I was speaking about this recently at a conference, and my advice was build for a problem that people have. Sounds simple, but actually, that's actually quite challenging. Build for a proper problem that people have, and don't obsess over the product, obsess over the problem. Because so many founders that I see become attached to their product and they forget about the bigger problem. But if you obsess over the problem space,
Mhm.
be more agile and adapt, and be transparent in how you solve it, I think is the key as well for building trust with people, investors, team members, everybody, being transparent about how you get to where you get to in solving that problem.
Yeah. And at the beginning, we talked about your own fundraising experience.
Yeah.
Any tips from that side on stuff or functionality that I should include? What could have helped you back then?
Yeah. I think, look, fundraising for women is really challenging. I still remember a story that's stuck in my head. I found it really challenging. And a story around kind of preventer and promoter questions,
Hmm.
and how even female VCs typically ask female founders preventer questions, not promoter questions. It is a stark difference in how
Yeah, the bias is real and
it's very,
persistent.
it really is. It really is. But there's a problem with how the funding system operates, right? Typically, male VCs will invest in what they can relate to, not what they can't see. Um, and I think it really helps having a VC who's an operator, who's been an operator before, because they understand the challenges. What I was saying before about building for a real problem and being transparent, they sound really simple things, but they're actually really hard. Um, and being data driven in that process removes that biases. So I think having a really good operator VC is really helpful. So my advice would be to not take money for money and not take money just for the sake of it, because you're better off getting product market fit in a non-VC world, in my opinion, and then raising, with specific goals of where you want to get to with that money. Don't just raise for the sake of raising. And I think having a network around you of people going through a similar experience is really important, because it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And my last point is always around having a deeper purpose other than wanting to be a founder. I've met so many founders that just want to be a founder, and actually, it's so hard, and some days it's really difficult to get up and keep pushing and keep doing what you're doing. So I think having that deeper sense of purpose and attachment to your why, your personal why, is really important, because that will be what will still get you out of bed every day and keep going.
Amen. So, Dr. Hannah Allen, thank you very much for this amazing interview, for your insights. If people would like to learn more about you and learn more about Heidi, or maybe even log on, check it out, where would you like to send them?
Yeah, please do. And thank you so much for having me. It's been a really engaging, interesting conversation. So I think we'll put the links of my LinkedIn. Always really happy to chat to other anyone in the space, but also other female founders if they want to reach out. And we'll also link Heidi on there for any of the kind of clinicians, nurses, allied healthcare professionals who want to check it out as well.
Cool. And we'll include those links in the show notes indeed. So, Dr. Hannah Allen, thank you very much for an amazing interview. Listeners, thank you very much for listening. And until the next episode, as always, keep being awesome. Well, that's it. Thank you for listening to episode 166 of Women Disrupting Tech, titled Using Technology to Bring the Human Side Back to Medicine with Dr. Hannah Allen. Hannah and I hope you found our conversation as informative and inspiring as we intended it to be. And if you have any questions for Hannah about this episode or about Heidi, please leave them in the comment section on Spotify, YouTube, and/or Apple Podcasts. If you want to connect with Dr. Hannah Allen or learn more about Heidi, please check out the links in the show notes. As usual, you can find the show notes at womendisruptingtech.blog and on my Substack via the links in the caption. There you can also find the links to the TEDx Koolhaven Women event and to my new fundingcoach.ai tool. If you found this episode useful, please take a moment to rate and review the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And if you don't follow us yet, hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss a future episode. Every week you'll hear how another founder or investor is working to close the funding gap, one conversation at a time. Once again, thank you for listening. I hope to see you in the next episode, and until then, as always, keep being awesome.